The alarm screams filled every corner of the ship. Red lights flashed across the walls of the transport vessel, and Park held tight to her seat as the entire room shook violently. She was an engineer, and she knew exactly what those sounds meant. The warp drive was failing. They were going to crash. "Everyone to the escape pods," the captain's voice crackled over the speakers. "This is not a drill. Abandon ship immediately." Ran through the twisting hallways with the other crew members. Her heart pounded in her chest. Behind her, she heard a terrible grinding sound as metal tore apart. The ship was breaking into pieces while they were still inside it. She reached Pod Bay 3 and threw herself inside the nearest escape pod. Two other crew members jumped in behind her, and the door sealed shut with a hiss. Through the small window, watched the morning star come apart like a toy being ripped by invisible hands. Pieces of the ship tumbled through space, burning as they fell toward the planet below. "Hold on," someone shouted, and then the pod launched. The Force pushed back into her seat. She couldn't breathe for a moment. The pod spun and twisted as it fell through the atmosphere of the planet. Fire covered the window. The heat inside the pod rose until sweat dripped down her face. She closed her eyes and prayed. The pod hit something hard. Metal screeched. His body jerked forward against the safety straps. Her head snapped to the side. Pain exploded in her left leg. Everything went dark for a few seconds. When her vision cleared, tasted blood in her mouth. The pod had stopped moving. She looked around, dazed. The other two crew members were gone. Their seats were empty. She didn't understand. Had they been thrown out during the crash? The pod door was half open, hanging from broken hinges. "Hello," called out. Her voice sounded weak. "Is anyone there?" No answer came, only the wind howling outside. Tried to stand, and agony shot through her left leg. She looked down and saw her shin bent at a wrong angle. Broken, definitely broken. She bit down hard to stop from screaming. Panic tried to take over her mind, but she forced it down. She was an engineer. Engineers solved problems. This was just another problem to solve. She reached up and activated the emergency beacon in the pod's control panel. A small green light blinked on. Help would come eventually. She just had to survive until then. Using her arms, dragged herself out of the pod. The pain in her leg was terrible, but she kept moving. Outside, she found herself in a desert. Red sand stretched in every direction under a purple sky. The air was hot and dry. This planet was not made for humans. She knew this planet, VII. It was home to the people, a race of tall beings who looked like a cross between humans and cats. They were warriors, proud and strong. They didn't think much of humans. To them, humans were weak and soft. Spotted something in the distance, a building, old and damaged, an outpost of some kind. It was far away, maybe half a kilometer. With a broken leg, it might as well have been on another planet, but she had no choice. The pod offered no protection, and night would come soon. She found a piece of metal in the pod wreckage and used it as a crutch. Every step hurt. Every movement sent fire through her leg. She fell twice in the sand and had to drag herself back up. By the time she reached the outpost, the purple sky was turning dark. The outpost was a military building abandoned long ago. The door hung open. Inside, found old equipment covered in dust, medical supplies in sealed containers, broken computers, and in the corner, a defense turret that looked like it might still work. Collapsed against the wall and opened the medical kit. She found pain medicine and injected it into her arm. The relief was immediate but not complete. She wrapped her leg as best she could, using metal strips from a shelf as a splint. It wasn't perfect, but it would keep the bone from moving. As darkness fell, she heard sounds outside, clicking noises, low growls that made her blood turn cold. Through a crack in the wall, she saw shapes moving in the shadows, big shapes as large as ground cars. They had too many legs and jaws that looked like they could bite through metal. Beasts. She had read about them in the ship's database. They were the most dangerous predators on VII, Even soldiers feared them, and now 6 of them were circling the outpost, drawn by the smell of her blood. Looked at the broken defense turret. Her engineer's mind went awork. She dragged herself across the floor to examine it. The power cell was dead, but the targeting system looked intact. She had parts from the escape pod. Maybe, just maybe, she could make it work. For the next 6 hours worked. Her hands shook from pain and fear. The beasts scratched at the walls. They pushed against the door. One of them managed to get its head through a window, snapping its jaws at her, screamed and threw a piece of metal at it. The beast pulled back, but it didn't leave. She connected wires. She rerouted power. She used parts she took from her pod's emergency battery. Her fingers bled from cuts and her vision blurred from exhaustion. But finally, the turret hummed to life. Programmed the targeting system and activated it. The turret spun and fired. The sound was deafening in the small space. Outside, she heard the beast screaming. The turret fired again and again, its automated system tracking each target. When silence finally came, crawled to the door and looked outside. 6 massive bodies lay still in the red sand. The turret had killed them all. She had done it, she had survived. Dragged herself back inside and collapsed. She had no more strength. The pain medicine was wearing off, and the agony in her leg returned. She closed her eyes, hoping the rescue team would find her before anything else did. The last thing she remembered before darkness took her was the blinking green light of the emergency beacon, still calling out into the night, still waiting for someone to answer. 3 days passed before anyone came. Commander stood in the command center of the military base, looking at the map on the screen. A distress signal had been detected in the wastes 3 days ago. It was from a human ship. Most of his officers had voted to ignore it. The wastes were dangerous, and humans were not important enough to risk lives. But was not most officers. He had given his word that the military would respond to all distress calls in their territory, even human ones. "Prepare the transport," he ordered. "We leave in 10 minutes." Scout Captain Han was already waiting at the transport ship. She was young for her rank, quick and smart. She had volunteered for this mission when others refused. "Do you really think anyone is still alive out there?" asked as they lifted off. Looked out at the red desert below. "No," he said honestly, "but we must look anyway." The flight took an hour. When they reached the coordinates of the distress signal, gasped. Below them, an old outpost stood in the desert. Around it lay 6 dead beasts. "That's impossible," one of the soldiers whispered. "Never attack in groups that large." "Land there," commanded. They set down near the outpost. Led his squad of 6 soldiers toward the building, weapons ready. They were definitely dead. Each one had been shot multiple times with precision. But the defense turret that had killed them was ancient, a model that had been out of use for 20 years. Inside the outpost, they found her. A human woman lay on the floor, unconscious. Her leg was badly broken and wrapped in a makeshift splint made from metal strips and cloth. Her uniform identified her as an engineer from the Morning Star. Next to her was a pile of tools and parts, and the defense turret that had saved her life. Knelt beside the woman and checked her pulse. "She's alive. Barely. She needs medical attention immediately." Looked around the outpost. His trained eye took in every detail. The way the turret had been repaired using parts from an escape pod. The empty water containers that showed the human had survived on less than half the water it would need. The defensive position she had created despite her injury. "Get her to the transport," ordered. "Move carefully, that leg is bad." As they lifted the unconscious human onto a stretcher, one of the soldiers spoke up. "Commander, we should leave her. She is just a human. Why waste our medical resources?" Turned to face the soldier. His eyes were cold. This human survived 3 days in the wastes with a broken leg. She repaired a defense turret we could barely operate ourselves. She killed 6 beasts alone. If you think that makes her weak, then perhaps you are the one who is not fit to be a soldier." The soldier said nothing more. They were carrying the stretcher to the transport when the human's eyes opened slightly. She looked confused and afraid. Her lips moved, trying to form words. "Leaned closer. Don't try to talk, you're safe now, we're taking you to medical care." But the human kept trying to speak. Finally the words came out weak but clear. "The outpost, Foundation, cracked, not safe." Frowned, "What is she saying?" "She's warning us," said surprised. "She thinks the outpost is dangerous." "She's delirious from pain," another soldier said. "Humans always panic." But had learned to trust his instincts. "Everyone move quickly. Get to the transport now." They hurried across the sand. The human had passed out again. They loaded her into the transport and lifted off. Watched the outpost through the window as they rose into the sky. 30 seconds later, the entire building collapsed inward. The foundation gave way exactly as the human had warned. If they had stayed even a minute longer, they would have been buried under tons of stone and metal. The transport was silent. Every soldier stared at. He looked down at the unconscious human on the stretcher. "She saved us," said quietly. "Even while dying, she tried to save us." When they reached the base, personally carried the human into the medical facility. The doctors were surprised to see their commander bringing in a human patient, but they began treatment immediately. Doctor, the head physician, examined the human's leg and shook her head. "This is a very bad break. She said it herself using metal strips and cloth. It's crude, but it probably saved the leg. How long was she out there?" 3 days, answered. Ears flattened against her head in shock. 3 days, in the wastes, with this injury. She looked at the human woman with new respect. "Commander, this human has a will to live stronger than most warriors I have treated." "Can you help her?" asked. "Yes, but she will need time to heal, several weeks at least." Nodded. "Give her the best care we have, and post guards at her door." "Guards, why?" "Because she earned them," said simply. Over the next day, word spread through the military base about the human who survived the wastes alone. Soldiers who heard the story didn't believe it at first. Humans were weak, everyone knew that. They were good at building things and talking, but they couldn't fight. They couldn't survive. But told everyone what she had seen. The dead beasts, the repaired turret, the makeshift medical treatment, the warning that saved their lives. Slowly, the soldiers began to wonder if maybe they had been wrong about humans. On the second day, assigned 2 of his best soldiers to guard the human's room. They stood at attention outside her door as if she were a visiting general. Young children who lived on the base with their military families heard the story too. They gathered in groups, whispering excitedly about the human woman who fought monsters and survived in the desert alone. To them, she was like a character from their adventure stories. Inside her room, Park slept. The doctors had given her medicine for the pain and for healing. Her leg was properly set now, held in place by advanced medical equipment. Her body was covered in cuts and bruises, but she would live. She didn't know about the soldiers standing guard outside her door. She didn't know that the entire base was talking about her. She didn't know that she had changed something fundamental in how these alien warriors viewed humanity. She only knew darkness and dreams, and somewhere in those dreams, she heard the clicking of beasts and saw the blinking green light of a beacon that had finally been answered. On the 3rd day, Doctor stood beside bed and smiled. "Your vitals are improving rapidly. You humans are tougher than you look." Outside the medical facility, Commander stood with Scout Captain Han, looking through the window at the sleeping human. "What will happen to her when she wakes?" asked. "That," said, "depends on what she wants, but I think her life is about to become very complicated." He had no idea how right he was. Park opened her eyes slowly. The ceiling above her was white and smooth. Medical equipment beeped softly nearby. For a moment she couldn't remember where she was or how she got there. Then the memories came flooding back. The crash, the desert, the beasts. She tried to sit up, and pain shot through her leg. Not as bad as before, but still there. "Easy," a voice said. A doctor approached her bed. She was tall with golden fur and kind eyes. "You are safe now. You are in the military medical facility. I am doctor." "How long?" His voice came out rough and dry. 5 days since we brought you here. Your leg is healing well, but you must not move too much yet." Handed her a cup of water. "You are very lucky to be alive." Drank the water slowly. "The others from my ship." 16 survivors total. They were rescued within hours of the crash. Their pods landed in safer areas. Paused. "You are the only one who landed in the wastes." Of course, his bad luck had always been reliable. "Can I stand?" asked. "Not yet, perhaps in a few more days. For now, rest." Smiled. "You have visitors waiting outside. Many visitors. Should I let some in?" Nodded, confused. Who would want to visit her? Opened the door, and immediately 2 soldiers snapped to attention. They stood like statues, their weapons at their sides, facing her door. Stared at them in shock. "Why are there guards?" she asked. "Commander assigned them. They have been here since you arrived." Seemed amused by his confusion. "It is an honor. Usually only high-ranking officers receive personal guards." "But I'm not a high-ranking officer. I'm just an engineer." Before could respond, voices echoed from down the hallway. Young voices, excited and loud. A moment later, a group of children appeared, led by a small boy with dark spots on his golden fur. "Is she awake?" the boy asked eagerly. "Can we see her?" Behind the children came an older woman who looked exhausted. "Minyu, you cannot just run off like that." "I am sorry, doctor." The cubs heard the human had woken up, and they insisted on coming. Counted 7 children, all staring at her with wide, bright eyes. They ranged in age from maybe 5 to 8 years old. In human years, anyway. She wasn't sure how aging worked. "You killed the spotted boy," Minyu said excitedly. 6 of them, all by yourself. "And you survived for 3 days with a broken leg," another child added. "And you fixed the turret even though you were hurt," said a small girl with white fur. Felt overwhelmed. I just did what I had to do. I was scared the whole time." "But you did it anyway," Minyu said seriously. "That's what makes you a warrior. My father says true warriors are afraid but fight anyway." "I'm not a warrior," protested. "I'm an engineer." The children looked at each other, as if she had said something silly. "You fought and survived," the white-furred girl said. Her name tag read Lee. "That makes you a warrior, the best kind." The older woman, who introduced herself as Pack Mother, gently tried to guide the children away. "Come now, cubs. The human needs to rest." "Wait," Minyu said. He pulled something from his pocket. It was a data pad. "We made a petition. All of us signed it. We are submitting it to General today." "A petition?" asked confused. "You should receive the Star of Valor," Minyu explained as if it were obvious. "It is the highest military honor. You earned it by surviving and protecting yourself and warning the soldiers. So we wrote a petition asking the general to give it to you." His mouth fell open. "The Star of Valor, but that's for soldiers who do incredible things in battle. I'm not even." "The law does not say you must be," a cub with gray fur pointed out. "It says you must show valor, courage, and protect others. You did all those things." "I really don't think," started. "We already submitted it this morning," said proudly. "It is in the official system now. The general has to read it." "Looked, I tried to stop them, but they found a way to access the military petition system. I did not even know cubs could do that." "Minyu's older brother showed us how," another cub admitted. For the next 30 minutes, the cubs told every detail of their petition. They had included witness statements from Commander's team. They had researched the exact wording of the Star of Valor requirements. They had even found 3 historical cases where non-beings received military honors. didn't know whether to laugh or cry. These children had done more research than she did for her engineering degree. "This is going to cause problems," she said weakly. "Why?" Minyu asked, genuinely confused. "You earned it." "Because I'm human. Your people don't see us as warriors." Stepped closer to the bed. Her eyes were sad. "My parents died in battle last year. They were brave warriors, but they had a full squad with them and weapons and training. You had nothing. You were alone and hurt, and you still survived. If they could get medals, you should too." The simple logic of children. It cut through all the politics and prejudice like a knife. "Thank you," said softly. "Even if nothing comes of it, thank you for thinking I was worth the effort." "Something will come of it," Minyu said confidently. "You will see." The cubs visited every day after that. They brought drawings they made of fighting the beasts. Some of the drawings were creative. In one, she was riding like a horse. In another, she had somehow grown claws and was fighting hand to hand. "I used a turret," reminded them, laughing. "I did not fight them with my hands." "The story is better this way," Minyu insisted. News of the Cubs' petition spread through the base faster than a wildfire. Some adults thought it was funny. Others were angry that children would embarrass the military this way. A few, like Commander, thought the Cubs might have a point. On the third day after woke up, she had a different visitor, a human woman in a diplomatic uniform. She introduced herself as Ambassador Shin. "I came as soon as I heard," said, sitting beside the bed. "I wanted to make sure you were being treated well." "Everyone has been very kind," assured her. "And this petition, the Cubs asking for you to receive a military medal." Sighed, "I didn't ask for that. I wish they hadn't done it. It's just going to make things awkward." Was quiet for a moment. "Lieutenant Park, do you know why humans and have never had strong military cooperation?" "Because they think we're weak." "Yes, and because we let them think that. We focus on being diplomats and engineers and scientists. We don't want to threaten their warrior pride." Leaned forward. "But you survived something that would kill most soldiers. Maybe it is time they knew what humans are really capable of." "I don't want to be a symbol," said. "I just want to heal and go home." "Sometimes we don't get to choose," said gently. "Those cubs saw something the adults missed. They saw strength where their elders saw weakness. That matters." After left, lay in bed thinking. Outside her door, the two guards still stood watch. Down the hall, she could hear the cubs playing and laughing. Somewhere in the command center, generals were probably arguing about what to do with an embarrassing petition from children. She closed her eyes and wished she had landed anywhere else on this planet. But she hadn't. She had landed in the wastes, and she had survived, and now she had to deal with whatever came next. 3 days later, Doctor finally allowed to stand. With support, she took her first shaky steps. Her leg hurt, but it held her weight. Outside her window, she saw Minyu and the other cubs playing in the courtyard. They were pretending to fight beasts, growling and jumping around. Despite everything, smiled. Maybe being a symbol wouldn't be so bad if it meant giving those children someone to look up to. Even if she didn't feel like a warrior, maybe she could try to be what they saw in her. At least until her leg healed and she could go home. General was not a man who liked surprises. He had led the military forces on VII for 12 years through 3 border conflicts and 2 natural disasters. He had seen soldiers do incredible things and terrible things. He thought nothing could surprise him anymore. Then 7 cubs filed a petition demanding a human receive the Star of Valor, and suddenly his carefully ordered world became very complicated. He sat in his office, reading the petition for the 3rd time. It was surprisingly well written. The cubs had cited military law, historical precedent, and witness testimony. They had even included diagrams showing the defensive position the human had created and the repair work she had done on the turret. "Sir, you have to admit they did their research," his aide, Captain, said, was trying very hard not to smile. "This is not funny," Captain growled. "Do you know what will happen if I approve this? Half the military will think I have gone soft. The other half will think I am making a political statement about human relations. And if you reject it, then I look like I am afraid of the opinion of children, and I prove that we do not actually honor valor when we see it, only when it comes from the right species. Set down the petition. I need facts. Get me tech specialist O. I want a full investigation of what happened in the wastes, every detail." O arrived within the hour. He was young and smart, one of the best technical analysts in the base. Gave him a simple order: find out exactly what Lieutenant Park did during those 3 days and determine if it truly qualified for the Star of Valor. Spent 2 days at the crash site. He brought a full team with him. They analyzed the escape pod wreckage, the abandoned outpost, the dead beasts, and every piece of evidence they could find. When returned, he requested a private meeting with the general. Granted it immediately. "Sir, you need to see this," said, activating a holographic display. "I have reconstructed her actions hour by hour." The display showed a timeline, walked the general through it step by step. She crashed at approximately 1400 hours local time. The impact broke her left tibia and fibula in 2 places. Based on the blood trail, she dragged herself out of the pod and across half a kilometer of desert to reach the outpost. That journey alone would have killed most people. The display showed a small figure dragging itself across red sand. At the outpost, she performed field medicine on herself using supplies she found there. The quality of her work was impressive. I showed the scans to Doctor. She said the human did better than some trained medics could have done. Leaned forward, watching the reconstruction. She then assessed the defense turret and determined it could be repaired. "Sir, that turret was a Mark 7 model. We decommissioned those 20 years ago because they were too complicated to maintain in the field. She repaired it using parts from her escape pod's power system, creating adapters from scrap metal. My team tried to recreate her work. It took us 6 hours with proper tools and no injuries. She did it in 6 hours with a broken leg and improvised equipment." The display showed the human working, her hands moving quickly despite her injury. The beasts arrived after dark. There were 6 of them, which is highly unusual, are solitary hunters. They must have been drawn by the smell of blood. She programmed the turret's targeting system while they were trying to break into the outpost. Her code was clean and efficient. She used every available power reserve to maximize the turret's operational time. The holographic circled the outpost. The turret spun and fired. One by one they fell. The turret killed all 6 beasts over the course of 20 minutes. Then the power died completely. If there had been a 7th, she would have had no defense. Paused. "Sir, I also analyzed her water consumption. She had 2 emergency water packs from the pod. Together, they held approximately 3 liters. Requires 8 liters of water for 3 days in desert conditions. She survived on less than half of what we would need." Was quiet for a long moment. "What about the structural warning when Commander's team found her?" "I analyzed the outpost foundation. She was correct. The building was minutes from collapse. The stress fractures were not visible from the outside. She would have had to notice subtle clues, cracks in the walls, shifting of the floor, perhaps small sounds. While injured and barely conscious, she still assessed the structural integrity and warned the rescue team." Looked at the general directly. "Sir, in my professional opinion, what she did was extraordinary." "Extraordinary enough for the Star of Valor." Chose his words carefully. The Star of Valor requires 3 things: valor in the face of danger, courage under extreme conditions, and actions that protect others. She demonstrated all 3. If she were, there would be no question. Dismissed and sat alone in his office. He pulled up the official requirements for the Star of Valor on his computer. He had memorized them years ago, but he read them again anyway. The Star of Valor is awarded to any member of the military forces, or any individual under military protection, who distinguishes themselves through valor and courage in the face of mortal danger, and whose actions preserve the lives of others. Any individual, not any individual. He called for a meeting of his senior staff. 12 officers gathered in the conference room, presented findings without commentary. Then he opened the floor for discussion. The room erupted. This sets a dangerous precedent, Colonel Park argued. If we give medals to humans, next they will want command positions. She is not even a soldier, Major added. The Star of Valor is a military honor. She is a civilian. But Commander stood up. She was under military protection the moment she entered our territory. That makes her eligible under our own laws, and her actions saved my team. 6 soldiers are alive because she warned us about the structural failure. She was delirious, countered. It could have been random words. It was not random, said firmly. She assessed the situation correctly while dying. That is not luck, that is skill and awareness. Scout Captain Hand spoke next. I have served for 8 years. I have seen soldiers receive medals for less. One lieutenant received a Star of Valor for holding a position for 6 hours. This human held a position alone for 3 days while injured. How is that not worthy? Because she is not one of us, said quietly. The room went silent. The real issue was finally on the table. Let the silence stretch for a moment, then he spoke. I have been a soldier for 30 years. I have awarded the Star of Valor 16 times. Every time I ask myself one question, would I want this person beside me in battle? If the answer was yes, they got the medal. He looked around the room. I have read the reports. I have seen the evidence. And I can say with certainty that I would want Lieutenant Park beside me in battle. She is resourceful, tough, and brave. The Cubs saw that immediately. Why can we not? Because we are not Cubs, said. We cannot afford to be naive. Perhaps we cannot afford to be blind, shot back. The debate continued for 2 hours. Some officers were firmly against. Others were cautiously supportive. A few, were passionate advocates. Finally called for a vote. It was not required by law. The decision was his alone, but he wanted to know where his officers stood. 7 voted in favor, 5 voted against. Thanked them all and dismissed the meeting. He sat alone in the conference room afterward, thinking about leadership and tradition and change. That evening, he went to the medical facility. The 2 guards outside's room saluted as he approached. I wish to speak with the human, he said. They opened the door. Inside was sitting up in bed, reading something on a data pad. She looked up in surprise when the general entered. Sir, she said nervously, trying to stand. Do not, ordered. Your leg is still healing. He pulled a chair close to the bed. I am General, I command this base. I know who you are, sir. Is something wrong? That depends on your perspective. Studied her carefully. She was small by standards, young, and still bore the marks of her ordeal. Tell me, Lieutenant Park, why did you warn Commander's team about the structural failure? Because the building was going to collapse. They needed to know. You were barely conscious. You had survived 3 days alone. Most beings in that situation would think only of themselves. Why did you think of my soldiers? Looked confused by the question. Because they came to help me. They risked their lives to be there. I could not let them get hurt if I could prevent it. Nodded slowly. The Cubs submitted a petition requesting you receive the Star of Valor. Are you aware of this? Yes, sir. I have tried to explain to them that I do not deserve such an honor. Why not? Because I am not a soldier. I did not do anything special. I just tried to survive. Do you know what the Star of Valor represents? Bravery in battle, sir. Not exactly. It represents valor in the face of mortal danger and actions that protect others. You demonstrated both, leaned back in his chair. I have ordered a full investigation into your survival. The findings are remarkable. He spent the next 20 minutes telling her everything had discovered, listened with growing disbelief. I did not realize, she started. "I just did what seemed necessary." "That is what makes it worthy," said. "Necessity is the heart of survival. You assessed, adapted, and acted. These are the qualities we value most in our warriors." He stood up. "I cannot tell you what I will decide regarding the petition, but I wanted you to know that it is being taken seriously." After the general left, sat in stunned silence. She had thought the petition was just children being enthusiastic. She had not realized it would lead to investigations and debates among the highest military officers on the base. Outside her window, she could see the two guards still standing at attention. Inside her chest, her heart beat faster with anxiety. Whatever happened next, her life had definitely become very complicated. 3 days after his conversation with Lieutenant Park, General made his decision. He announced it to his senior staff first, then to the entire base, and finally to the high command. Lieutenant Park would receive the Star of Valor. The response was immediate and divided. Some celebrated, others protested. News networks across space picked up the story. For the first time in history, a human would receive the highest military honor of the people. Scheduled the ceremony for the following week. That gave time for the other survivors from the Morning Star to arrive, and for Ambassador Shin to organize the human delegation. In the medical facility, felt overwhelmed. "I still do not think I deserve this," she told Doctor. "The general disagrees," said with a smile. "And 7 cubs disagree very loudly. You should hear them. They have been celebrating for 2 days." Indeed, Minyu and his friends had become minor celebrities themselves. News reporters wanted to interview the cubs who had filed the petition. Minyu told anyone who would listen that he knew all along the general would make the right choice. His leg had healed enough for her to walk with a support brace, cleared her for limited movement. For the next week, practiced walking up and down the hallways of the medical facility. The guards still stood outside her door, which made her uncomfortable, but they refused to leave. "General's orders," they said simply. On the 4th day, the other survivors from the Morning Star arrived. 16 people, all of whom had been rescued within hours of the crash. They gathered in his room, amazed by her story. "You were out there for 3 days, engineer asked, shaking his head. "I landed in a field near a city. They picked me up in 30 minutes. "I landed near a commercial transport route," pilot added. "I didn't even deploy my survival kit." They all stared at like she was a stranger. To be fair, she felt like a stranger to herself. The woman who had dragged herself across a desert with a broken leg seemed like a different person. Ambassador visited again, this time with formal clothes for to wear at the ceremony. "Nothing too fancy," said, laying out a clean uniform. "The respect simplicity, just look presentable and be yourself." "I am not good at ceremonies," admitted. "Nobody is, you just stand there and try not to pass out," smiled. "I will be there, so will all the other humans from your ship. You will not be alone." The night before the ceremony could not sleep. She kept thinking about the desert, the beasts, the moment she thought she would die alone. Then she thought about the cubs' excited faces when they first visited her. The way Minyu had insisted she was a warrior. The way had said, "Pack protects pack." Maybe this was not about her at all. Maybe this was about what she represented, a bridge between humans and a chance to show that strength came in many forms. The morning of the ceremony arrived bright and hot. Doctor helped get dressed. The uniform fit well, though felt strange wearing it. She had always thought of herself as an engineer first, not a lieutenant. "You look very professional," said. "The general will be pleased." 2 guards escorted through the base. As they walked, soldiers stopped and saluted. Some looked respectful, others looked curious. A few looked disapproving, kept her eyes forward and tried not to think about how many people would be watching. They reached the parade ground, stopped in shock. Thousands of soldiers filled the area. They stood in perfect formation, their dress uniforms gleaming in the sun. At the center of the ground stood a raised platform where General waited with several other high-ranking officers. But what caught attention was the platoon standing directly in front of the platform, 50 warriors in full ceremonial armor. She recognized Commander at their head. These were the soldiers from his Golden Claw battalion. "They are your honor guard," one of her escorts explained quietly. "The general assigned them personally." His throat felt tight. An entire platoon stood guard for her, for a human engineer who had just been trying to survive. The ceremony began with traditional military music, deep drums and wind instruments that sounded like the howling of ancient beasts. Then General stepped forward to speak. His voice carried across the parade ground without any amplification. Voices were naturally loud when they wanted to be. "We gather today to honor an act of valor," began. 3 weeks ago, Lieutenant Park of the human transport vessel Morning Star crashed in the wastes. Most of you know this region. Many of you have trained there. You know how dangerous it is. The assembled soldiers stood silent and attentive. Lieutenant Park survived alone in that desert for 3 days with a broken leg. She repaired a defense turret using improvised equipment. She defended herself against 6 beasts, and when rescue arrived, even while dying, she warned her rescuers of danger and saved their lives. Paused, letting his words sink in. 7 cubs from this base filed a petition requesting Lieutenant Park receive the Star of Valor. Some of my officers thought this was inappropriate. Some thought it was naive. I thought it was correct. He gestured to the front row, where Minyu and the other cubs sat with Pack Mother. They wore special ceremonial sashes, and their faces glowed with pride. These cubs saw what we adults often miss. They saw valor without prejudice. They saw courage without questioning its source. They reminded us that our laws exist for a reason, to honor those who deserve honor, regardless of species or circumstance. Looked directly at the assembled soldiers. From this day forward, let it be known that the military recognizes strength in all its forms. We honor not just the warriors who fight with weapons, but also those who fight with will, intelligence, and determination. He turned to, "Lieutenant Park, please approach." Walked forward. Her leg still hurt, and she tried not to limp obviously. The walk to the platform felt like it took forever. Every eye in the parade ground was on her. She climbed the steps and stood before the general. He held a small box in his hands. "Lieutenant Park," said formally, "by the authority granted to me as base commander of VII, and in accordance with military law, I hereby award you the Star of Valor for exceptional courage in the face of mortal danger, and for actions that preserved the lives of others." He opened the box. Inside was a silver medal shaped like a 4-pointed star. Each point was etched with intricate patterns. In the center was a clear crystal that caught the light. Pinned the medal to his uniform. His hands were steady and precise. "Wear this with pride," he said quietly so only she could hear. "You earned it." Then he stepped back and saluted her. A human, a civilian engineer. He saluted her with the full formal respect of a general. Behind him, every officer on the platform saluted. In the parade ground, thousands of soldiers raised their hands in salute. Felt tears in her eyes. She returned the salute as best as she could, trying to remember the proper form from her basic training years ago. The general smiled slightly. "Close enough," he murmured. Then Minyu and were allowed to approach. They carried traditional warriors' cords, thick ropes of braided gold fabric that honored soldiers displayed on their dress uniforms. The cubs draped them over shoulders with careful reverence. "You are Pack now," whispered. "Pack protects Pack." Minyu just grinned at her, his eyes shining with happiness. The formal ceremony was supposed to end there, but when turned to leave the platform, all 7 cubs broke formation and ran forward. They threw their arms around her in a group hug, laughing and chattering excitedly. The adults on the platform looked shocked at this breach of protocol, But then someone laughed, then someone else. Soon, the entire parade ground was filled with the sound of laughter and applause. General shook his head but smiled. Let them celebrate, they earned this moment too. After the ceremony, there was a reception in the officers' hall. Ambassador stayed close to, helping her navigate the social requirements. Many officers approached to offer congratulations. Some were sincere, others were merely polite, could tell the difference. Commander came with Scout Captain. My team wanted me to give you this, said, handing her a small carved stone. It is a tradition. When someone saves your life, you give them a piece of your home stone. This is from my family's land. Held the stone carefully. It was warm and smooth. Thank you, I do not know what to say. Say you will remember us as we will remember you, said simply. The other survivors from the Morning Star surrounded her eventually, full of questions and congratulations. They wanted to hear the whole story directly from her. Found herself telling it again, trying to make it sound less dramatic than it felt. As the evening wore on, found a quiet corner and sat down. Her leg hurt from standing so long. She looked at the medal on her uniform, still not quite believing it was real. A shadow fell across her. She looked up to see General. Tired, Lieutenant? He asked. Very tired, sir. You did well today. He sat down in the chair next to her. I have a question for you if you do not mind. Of course, sir. What will you do now? Your ship is destroyed. You have no assignment. You could request transfer back to human space. Thought about that. She thought about the desert and the medical facility and the cubs' excited faces. I would like to stay, she said slowly. If there is a position for me here, I am still an engineer. I could be useful. Nodded. I was hoping you would say that. We could use a good engineer, especially one who can repair Mark 7 turrets with scrap metal. He stood to leave, then paused. The cubs will be pleased. They have been asking if you were going to stay. After he left, sat alone for a while longer. Through the window, she could see the red desert in the distance. The wastes, where she had nearly died, where she had discovered something about herself she never knew existed. She was not a warrior in the traditional sense. She would never be a soldier who fought in battles, but she had fought for her life and won, and maybe that was enough. 6 months later, was chief engineer at the base. She had her own quarters, her own team of technicians who treated her with respect, and a regular stream of cubs who visited to hear stories about the desert. The Star of Valor ceremony had been broadcast across both human and space. The footage of the general saluting her and the cubs breaking protocol to hug her had been viewed over 1 billion times, had become famous without wanting to be. But more importantly, things had changed. Human military cooperation had increased. More humans were applying to serve on joint missions. They had started to see humans not as weak, but as differently strong. And it all started because 7 cubs refused to accept that strength only came in one form. Kept a photo on her desk from the ceremony. In it, she stood wearing the Star of Valor, surrounded by cubs, with an entire platoon standing guard in the background. Pack Mother had printed the photo and given it to her. On the back, in careful handwriting, were 4 words. Pack protects Pack always. Looked at that photo every day and smiled. She had survived the wastes. She had earned the respect of warriors, and she had found a new home among aliens who had learned to see her as she truly was. Not weak, not soft, just human, and that was more than enough.